Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions. Dear host Bryan, it's a new week. That means we're looking at a new theme, and this theme is a bit of an opposition, a bit of an opposite of lo-fi that we checked out a couple weeks back. This one's called Lush Productions, and where lo-fi was about compressed, usually sort of distorted or destroyed audio production, this one we're going to be looking at some very clean production that utilizes rich textures, layered instrumentation, string arrangements, possibly extended chords, just kind of looking for the opposite of lo-fi, so possibly even maybe hi-fi might be a way of looking at this week if you would like. We're going to start off with Triassic from the Ocean. See what these guys are doing. We've checked out the Ocean a couple times before. I'm kind of ready for a sort of post-rock kind of idea. Very droney. And yeah, let's see what these guys are up to with this. Yeah, very cool. I'm not sure which tempo is accurate, but this one's definitely twice as fast as what I thought the intro was. Yeah, I love the odd syncopation that was on the cymbals in the previous section. Slow layering is, yeah, this is good. Yeah, really fuzzy ambient tone as well. I love that the bass is leading this whole section. Ooh.
So disconnected, and yes, I get it, but there is just no point in further confrontation. Dysfunction, no communication skills. You undermine a mutual resolution strategy with your condescending, patronizing habitus of false modesty.
Yeah. I love how the drums are utilizing the same syncopated rhythm from that last heavy section right here, but utilizing lighter instrumentation and strokes to achieve a lighter idea, a lighter representation of the same rhythmic idea.
You feel so disconnected, and yes, I get it, but there is just no point in further confrontation, dysfunctional communication skills. You
The
are
vocals just taking one single note and playing an entire bar based on that one note really allows it to blend into the background and become less of a lead instrument. Yeah, we're finally seeing the blending of these two ideas. Oh yeah, yeah, bring on the Phrygian. Yeah, once again, we have this really wide, fuzzy, atmospheric idea sitting as a bed for everything else to be played over. Ooh, what a way to bring that back. Ooh, the bass, first of all, is killing it right here. But there's some really interesting rhythmic ideas going on in the drums against the 4-chorus stabilized in the clean vocals. Yeah, halftime it right here. Very interesting. Yeah, they're emphasizing the beginning of every bar on the and of one. Yeah, we got this really cool 3 against 4 idea going on right here as well, with the cymbals doing the 3 and everybody else working off of the 4. Yeah, very cool. Um, it's been a long time since I've heard The Ocean, the band. Um, and there's a lot of parts in here that I think, yeah, that's exactly what I remember The Ocean for being. But there's also a lot of cool things that I noticed that I was like, huh, I didn't know that they were, working within those sorts of lines and are utilizing those sorts of tools in their music. And I think that's one of the things just for me getting more adjusted to dronier post rock, post metal stuff. Because it's been, like I said, it's been a while since we've listened to the Ocean. And it is really about developing the skills to listen to specific types of music. Even people who, spend a lot of time learning to listen to difficult to listen to music, people who learn to appreciate opera or classical, jazz, especially once you get into some of the non-commercial stuff like bebop, you get away from, swinging big bands and free jazz. uh, Even those people have a difficult time appreciating some of the nuances that go into stuff like pop and rock and metal. But even when you look at a specific genre, rock and metal, they're kind of, there's definitely a divide there, but I usually group them together. They're very similar when compared to other large genres of music. There's still a lot of areas for people to have to learn how to appreciate that type of music. And I think that this type of music, the drony kind of post rock, post metal stuff, is definitely an acquired taste. You have to listen to a lot of it, at least in my case. Some people might be naturally drawn to it, but I've had to listen to a lot of it to really begin to understand and see the nuances that it presents. Uh, So yeah, first of all, that's just awesome. There's a high chance if I go back and listen to some of the Ocean stuff that we've checked out in the past, that I have more praise for them or more appreciation, or maybe I just enjoy them on a casual level more than I did on that first reaction. So let's dig into some of the stuff going on here. Um, yeah, there is a lot of really cool stuff. So we have this really nice tempo shift in the opening. We start off with this sort of chill groove. We have a guitar coming in, something else is playing alongside it. There wasn't any real strict beat yet, but I felt it as a 4. Probably just because 4 is pretty standard, but I also feel like there was some sort of effect giving a pulse-like element to the long held out guitar part. But I might have, I don't know. I can't 100% say that that's actually what happened. It's just sort of what I remember for some reason. Um, but we shifted from that into the first major section, out of the intro into the first major section. And we brought in percussion, we brought in some more instruments, we brought the bass in, just leading this entire first section beautifully. I love this bass tone. I'm going to have to talk about that in a bit. But we actually get our first real note of the tempo. And it's twice as fast as what I was feeling. And this is something that actually crops up quite a few times throughout this song, is jumping between halftime and regular speed. Or double time and regular speed, however you want to go about looking at it. I suppose you could look at that opening tempo as the main one, and then the majority of the song is just in double time. So that's a very strong aspect of the song. I do want to bring up the production a bit. Even right here in the beginning, we have drums, we have a couple guitars, we have the bass, and then when the dual vocals come in, the clean vocals, everything is layered and positioned in the sound sphere meticulously. There's a strong attention to detail of where instruments are and what they're doing in those spaces. It creates a very rich sound, and it's a very clean, rich sound, and I absolutely enjoy it. I don't remember about the Ocean. For some reason, I kind of had them in the same area as Cult of Luna, working within this wall of sound concept. But this was a lot cleaner. There's a lot more space and presence, space between instruments and presence for individual instruments throughout this entire track. It achieves a lot of the same goals that Cult of Luna typically does with their music, creating atmospheres for the listener to fall into and be absorbed by. And a lot of these sounds are going to be a bit heavier. We do have heavy sections to this song, which is what I remember about the ocean. I don't remember some of these calmer sections being in the songs we've explored previously, but I do see that this is a rather new song, September 2020, so it could be that they have begun developing sort of a softer side to their sound. But these guys do that same concept of creating very vivid and lush atmospheres for the listener to be absorbed by. They do it in a very clean and meticulous, spread out kind of way. Every instrument has its place, both sonically, where they're positioned in the sound, and also musically, how their notes are arranged and positioned against what everybody else is playing. And it just creates a gorgeous sound and soundscape atmosphere. It's yeah, it's right up my alley. I do want to mention as well, in this section we have the dual vocal setup, and I touched on it a little bit. Want to dive into a bit more right here. The two vocals are perfectly harmonized with each other, the same distance at any given point. If one is playing one note, the other one's playing like a fourth or a fifth above them, that distance does not change, I believe, throughout the entire verse. However, they do move with the chord changes. But what's interesting is that the melody line is literally just one note. I'm not sure if it's the root of the chord or if they've picked a specific tone, but they pick a note and they utilize that for every syllable. And when they hit beat 4 and they go to beat 1 of the next bar, they move a note. And it seems to be in relationship to a perfect relationship with the chord changes. So if the chord goes up a third, they're going to raise their note up a third. I'm just not sure what note, particularly of the chord, they're utilizing for their harmonies. But what's interesting is that due to this really repetitive nature, it almost turns into a sort of a pedal tone. And that mixed with the way that it's mixed, the vocals are not pushed above everything else. They're definitely a bit louder than everything, but it feels very centered. It doesn't feel like they're hovering above the instruments as it does in a lot of radio pop, radio rock. They're brought down a bit and it feels more centered within everything else. It almost feels like the very center at times of the band, and the instruments are all revolving around the vocals, which is very interesting. Because, like I said, they still have some priority. They still have some of the spotlight. I don't think it's necessarily too easy to ignore them like it would be with some black metal, where the vocals are just really pushed down underneath some of the instrumentation. These still have some prominence. They're just not physically placed above the band. It is kind of interesting. I don't think I've noticed that too much, but now that I'm replaying some of the music in my head, they really are kind of centered with the instruments appearing all around them. Huh. I gotta listen to more Ocean, see if they do that often. It is a wild production technique that I think works very well for what they're doing. Moving on though, we got to go to the bass. God, that bass is so good. It has a nice tone to it. It's got a lot of edge. It's not. There's a lot of rock bands and even some metal bands where the bass, I mean, the guitars get all the grit, they get all the fuzz, all the distortion, and then the bass are still fairly clean. And then we get stuff like what did we check out on? Oh, it was we checked out last Friday, I think, where the bass is just all fuzz, all bite, all distortion to the point that it's almost lost its native timbre. I think this is a nice middle ground. It has some of the bite and edge that you would give, an electric guitar if you're going for more of a like a lead line, a lead guitar tone. But it still has a lot of its native resonance, a lot of its native timbre to it. You can still tell it's a bass, but it has a bit of that compression, that distortion on top of it. And it just creates this force throughout the entire song. You can always tell when the bass is being played. And then, of course, right there at the beginning, when the bass line is the spotlighted element, it is just a dominating force. I fixated on it. There was no way I could look away from it or listen away from it. That's a terrible analogy. There's no way I could look away from it. It demanded my attention, and I loved what it was doing. It was setting a spectacular element in the atmosphere while also showing off a little bit. We don't get a lot of walking bass lines, especially at that tempo. So I enjoyed that. I did, and I loved how often the bass popped up throughout the song, and provided more of these bass line elements. The bass didn't seem to really ever adhere to just playing the root. There was always some movement to it, and I enjoy that. I wish we would have a lot more rock and metal where the bassist was contributing melodically or harmonically outside of just playing a pedal tone. Interesting, the vocals are doing the pedal tone work here. So, yeah, like I said, I got to listen to more Ocean stuff and see how much of this is just isolated for the song, in which case my brain's going to immediately jump to, oh, what does that mean thematically? And how much is sort of their identity in the production work or in their compositional work. Because there's, like I said, we're going to keep going, but already right off the bat, there's some really cool stuff going on here. We shift over into the heavy section. We get some growls in here. And I think it's interesting that the growls in the mix are higher than the clean vocals were. I don't think they're any more or less prominent than the clean vocals were, but they are lifted a bit out of the band, whereas the cleans, like I said, were more centered, acting more of like a gravitational center for all the instrumentation. And the whole sound of the song shifts at this point, not just because we go from this heavily layered, laid back kind of chill atmosphere to this heavy metal element, but also because, like I said, the layering of the instruments and the mix of how they're layered and put together is completely different. The vocals are stacked on top of everything now, and that completely changes the feel of the section. Instead of this roundness of the track that sort of envelops the listener, this is more narrow, like a stack of, going from a sphere to a stack. But it has more punch behind it, it has more weight. And I think they did a fantastic job utilizing the mix, the production, to emphasize this element of the song. It is heavier, it is punchier, and it's not just the music shifting to the heaviness. It's also some elements in the production that allow it to have or to amplify these aspects of it. And then we do this a couple of times. We do the back and forth thing, verse chorus concept. And the part that really throws me for a loop here is that I love the individual elements. I love the verse. I love the chorus. I love that we returned to something very similar to the verse when we entered into the bridge before moving into the final section. But something that still just does not work for me on a casual listening level is the length of time that we sit inside of these concepts. Now, I'm not going to offer any suggestions to alter it for the better, at least in my case as an audience, because anything that I suggest would be going against what they're doing here. It's simply something about the droning element, the slow burn, that it's been 2 years and I still do not have a very high tolerance for it. I have to be in a very specific mood to want to be enveloped by an atmosphere for several minutes of not having too much movement within those minutes. And usually for this kind of stuff, I'm not. Definitely not when I'm thinking critically. Having the brain looking for different elements in the music and paying attention, hyper specifically paying attention to stuff, only to realize I've cycled through everything and nothing's different. when's the next thing going to come up? I need to put an analysis together. That's sort of my brain during these reactions. Um, and I'm just sitting. I'm like, oh, is this change? Did this change? Okay, when's this next section coming up? I need to see what comes next so I can start putting a larger picture together. And yeah, it does not work for my brain critically in this situation. But even outside of this, if I were to listen to casually, like I said, I would have to be in a very specific emotion, whatever they're something very similar, not specifically what they're selling, but something similar to what they're selling, where I really want to feel it and sit within it and dwell within it. And usually, the stuff that post rock and post metal tend to dwell in and do slow burns about atmospherically and thematically are just not usually things I go about wanting to embrace too often. So I think that's my big hang up with music like this, is that I usually enjoy the sections individually in a vacuum, but they just go on for too long. And I certainly felt that cropping up in the middle once we get to the bridge section. There were some nice ideas in there that I liked, but for the most part, it just had me wondering, when are we going to move on? And it's the antithesis of how this music should be listened to. I completely acknowledge that. But unfortunately, that tends to be where I sit when I'm doing these types of videos. However, that does bring us to the ending, which I felt was a beautiful combination of everything we had seen so far. We had moved between highly layered chill sections with clean vocals to stacked heavy sections with growls, and we entered into a section that brought everything together. It had some really nice ideas of sort of a chill, lush melody. We had the aggression from the vocals, we had the heavier guitars, we had some lighter elements, and then we actually had a sort of call and response, and I think eventually even a hard layering of the harsh and the clean vocals. So at one point we actually had 3 vocals going off at the same time, 2 harmonized cleans, and then the growl on top of that. And once again, I do want to iterate that the growls are above the cleans here. I think this is the easiest way to visualize or listen in to what I'm talking about there, is the last, what is that, minute? 2 minutes? It's right after the call and response section where we get whatever the clean melody was, and then the harsh. There's a point right near the end where they're lining up and they're saying the exact same things. And the harshes are just so much higher in the mix than the cleans, and it's such an interesting choice to me. Maybe it's just because I'm so used to listening to a lot of extreme metals lately, where the harshes are pushed down into the mix. I'm starting to get used to that. Hearing the harshes so high up, it should be pretty normal for me. That's kind of how modern metalcore does it. When they have their harsh verses and then their clean choruses, they utilize that same concept of having the voices above everything else, the vocals. But it sounds so out of place in this style of music. So that's really interesting. It continues to blow my mind. I do want to talk a little bit about their floor bed before we head out of here. They used 2, maybe 3 different synthesizer sounds, sort of digital, atmospheric, very wide, fuzzy tones, just to kind of fill in some of the empty blank space that was showing up, especially in the quieter section. And some of the transitory sections as well, going between parts. You can really hear it. It doesn't call a lot of attention to itself. You really have to say, hey, what is that fuzzy tone going on? And listen in to what it is. But it's there. And it's just kind of, it's got like this fuzzy bite to it. It's real low, and it's not quiet, but it's not spotlighted. It's not given a lot of attention. But it does its jobs very well. It widens out the sound. It fills in a section of the track that doesn't have any sound going on it, so it sounds less anemic. And it's hidden away. And I think that is one of the things that I find most spectacular about production, is the unknown things. Uh, the sounds that do a job without the listener even realizing they're there. And yeah, it's just I have a lot of appreciation for production, especially after trying to get into it this last year, and mixing and mastering some of my own works and failing spectacularly at doing so often. It is a really interesting craft that I don't know how much requires just having a knack for it, having the ear for production, and how much can actually be learned. But listening in and hearing people do these little tricks and being like, "Hey, I caught on to that," but you know, I think the point was for me not to catch on to it. It's just fascinating. And it makes me want to go back to other stuff and like really listen into production, especially stuff that I haven't listened to in decades. Stuff maybe I was listening to as a teen. Maybe there's stuff in the production, which is what drew me to it. Because honestly, I listened to a lot of the same sounding stuff in my teens, but there was definitely bands that created music like what I listened to that I never enjoyed, and I wonder if some of that might have just been production. You never know. I don't know. My eyes have really been open to production work lately. And I just want to give a quick shout out to all of the production being done here. Like I said, not just the um, that ambient tone that fills in space through most of the track, but also the layering and the mix switch up between the clean and the harsh sections. Just a lot of really cool stuff going on. All right, those are my thoughts on the ocean's Triassic. That's where you guys come in, though. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought. If you enjoyed it or not, anything that stuck out to you that maybe I didn't touch on, hit me up. When you're done commenting, you can head up to the description box. In there is a link for Linktree. It'll take you to this screen. Has everything related to the channel. If you want to join the Discord community, follow me on Twitter, support me through Patreon, along with a bunch of other stuff. Above the description box, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I would greatly appreciate all three of them. Let's see, we got another video coming out 2 minutes ago. We're going to be looking at a special selection. It is kind of a big one. It's a lengthy song to begin with, but it is a request for Big Big Train, which I bumped up in the list to do today since their lead singer passed away last week. And a couple of people put in some Big Big Train special selections, and I figured I would bump them up due to the prominence, and we can use it as a way to, appreciate the works of this talented musician. So that's what we're going to be looking at today and tomorrow, and if anybody else gets some Big Big Train requests in, I'm sure probably bump them up. We might even do a whole week of Big Big Train if we get four total, I suppose. So yeah, that's tragic, but I figure we can, like I said, use this to celebrate the singer and his contributions to music. So yeah. Anyways, completely derailed my train of thought. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. And until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.